A very good evening to all our viewers and welcome to today's edition of the Evening Review. My name is Tewan Jabela, your host. Thank you for joining us. Tonight on the show we are joined by, in fact we are welcoming back the Managing Director of FlyNamibia, our local privately owned airline here. He is the MD and also co-owner of the company, and he's here to help us understand the objections that the company has raised recently, as reported widely in the local press. Andre, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for making time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. Let's get into it. The objections that FlyNamibia has raised against, I suppose, the registration of or the approval of Fly Etosha. What are the grounds? People are saying you are simply scared of competition.
Nothing can be further than the truth, because we're competing against all the regional and domestic carriers at the moment. The issuing of licenses is controlled by the Act 59 of 1948, 51 of 1949, and the Act allows any interested party, we are an interested party in this matter, to view every application and to make sure that the applications comply with the requirements of the Act itself, and to raise any concerns with the Transport Commission. Now, if you ask me what makes airplanes fly, money makes airplanes fly.
Yeah.
That's what money buys: safety. Money buys what is required to have a safe and efficient and a sustainable operation. One of the requirements of the Act is that the applicant shall provide proof of sufficient funds to be able to offer a safe and sustainable airline. Now, unfortunately, in this application, there was absolutely no evidence of any financial backing, which raised a major concern with us.
Yeah.
The Act also says that the applicant shall provide a timetable, the applicant shall provide the fees at which he's going to operate, which allows you to make a feasibility of the operation whether it can be safe or not.
Yeah.
None of that was provided. Furthermore, the application said that the applicant, which is one individual, previously employed by Air Namibia, owns in his own right, in his own name, owns aircraft to the value of 680 million Namibian dollars, and that he anticipated buying aircraft to the value of more than 1.6 billion Namibian dollars. Now, I know the guys earned good money at Air Namibia, but not good enough to own aircraft to the value of 680 million. No proof was provided that he actually did own those aircraft. None such aircraft are registered in this country that could possibly belong to him. So we've had a big question mark over that. The way in which we can address those concerns is to object against the application, and then to go with the applicant to the Transportation Commission, raise the concerns, and allow the Commission to interrogate the applicant on those points.
Yeah.
Should the applicant then satisfy the concerns of the Commission, it's a done deal. The license will be issued. But at least we had the opportunity, in the interest of safety, in the interest of the aviation industry, and in the interest of the tourism industry, to highlight the concerns we have and to raise those in front of the Commission so that the applicant can be interrogated on those.
Wonderful. You just again clear the part where you're talking about being an interested party. If you can just expound on that.
We have an air service license. We are licensed through the Transportation Commission. We are licensed to operate an airline in the country. Yeah. That makes us an interested party in any airline scheduled services application that may end up before the Transportation Commission.
Yeah, yeah. Again, also just for the benefit of our viewers, because a lot has been said ever since this whole thing came to the fore. Some people, asking, for example, how did you get to know about this upcoming operator and whatnot? If you can just satisfy the public as to where you got that information from, that there was such an application.
Whenever any party applies for a license, they submit an application to the Transportation Commission. It becomes a public document. It gets published in the Government Gazette, of which I have an example here to show you.
Yeah.
The application gets public. It's a public document.
Yeah.
It's there for anyone to see. So there's no secret behind it. We make sure that we get the Gazette and we see whatever goes on in our industry. It's in our interest.
Yeah, yeah. Then the other thing then, Andre, is the airline, the FlyNamibia, because as a matter of fact, some people, I mean, at a first glance, myself, I thought maybe you were opposed to Fly Etosha than I mean, the name being so closely sort of linked to yours. FlyNamibia, Fly Etosha, I thought that would have been the ground, but for you, it's a different thing. Someone said actually that if these guys do not have any of these things that they claim to have, why even bother yourself with that? Because if there's no money, there will be never an operation. So why bother yourself with that even?
Any application that is made, which becomes public knowledge like this one is,
yeah,
interrupts the market if it's not a sustainable operation. If claims are being made, such as they are being made, that our ticket prices, FlyNamibia's ticket prices were increased threefold,
yeah,
and that a far more affordable operation can be offered domestically.
yeah,
You know, it's disruptive in the market, and it is simply not true.
yeah,
We run, as FlyNamibia, we run the leanest operation possible, with no fancy strings attached to it, and we battle to make ends meet as is. So for a party to come and claim that we exorbitantly priced,
yeah,
that the services can be offered at much lower fares, is simply a market disruptor without any substance. And that's why we make sure that we oppose it, so that the actual facts can be exposed and can be provided to the Transportation Commission, so that the Commission can take the correct decision as to whether this is going to be a safe and a sustainable operation or not.
yeah. Speaking of the fees, Andre, do you think, for example, that if this airline or any other operating locally was in the market, that you would still charge what you charge now, or that that competition will trickle down to me as an end user, as a passenger, that I don't pay what I saw on Twitter today? Somebody who I think flew to, I don't know whether it's on Dangwa or somewhere locally, and their return ticket is 5,300, and people are arguing there that, you know, even going to Cape Town doesn't cost that much. If you can justify that.
There are many aspects that determine the price of a ticket.
Yeah.
The shorter the flight, remember we fly with jet aircraft on Dangwa and to Cape Town. The shorter the flight, the higher the fuel burn per sector becomes. The aircraft uses a massive amount of fuel to get to its level, and then it flies there for a short time on a short sector and for a long time on a long sector, and then obviously the descent. So your fuel cost and the provisions that we have to make, aircraft are limited by a number of aspects. Yeah. One of the major cost aspects is the cycles on the engines and the cycles on the landing gear. So on a short sector, you burn a lot of fuel, relatively more than on a long sector, and you have cycles that are much shorter than when you fly on a long sector. That's why it's possible to charge less per seat, relatively, per kilometer that you fly on a long sector than what it is on a short sector. Mm-hmm. The other thing also is that you have to recover your costs on that specific sector. You can't fly it at a loss. And domestically, we don't have high density sectors. We don't have sectors where we can rely on 45 or 50 passengers per flight. We have to work on the average load factors which we have, yeah, which means it translates to 25 to 30 passengers on a Dangwa flight on average, which means that all our costs we have to recover out of 25 passengers. Yeah. Now, if you compare that to say for example, Fly Etosha in South Africa, who flies with aircraft that carry 250 passengers. Obviously, the cost per seat can become much lower because they fly high density routes where they carry very close to 250 passengers each time. And that unfortunately is the reality we're faced with. I can assure you that we're not making more money than what we need to cover our costs in this operation at this stage.
Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, are you saying, for example, that because you don't have a lot of passengers going to Ondangwa, for example, but because the flight has to happen, that somehow then you are forced to find a way in which you do not make a loss on that flight that is not very full, but still has to take off and cost you money?
Our aim is to develop air transport in the country. We want to serve as many destinations as possible as FlyNamibia. That's our goal. Yeah. If you talk about the Ondangwa flight, certain days of the week there is a demand, but it's a small demand. Yeah. Certain days of the week there's a huge demand. We can fill the aircraft. So what we do is we consistently monitor how many passengers we carry per week. We have to average those out to see what's the average number of passengers we carry per flight, because it's senseless making your calculation on a full flight if you know that half the flights are going to be less than 50% full. So you have to work on an average load factor which you carry to determine what your average income is. You know what your costs are. Yeah. And based on that, you can make a match between your expenses and your average income. Yeah. And unfortunately, domestically, we don't have sufficient travelers to fill every aircraft every time. And that's why we have to factor the empty seats in.
Yeah. So on using that logic then, Andre, it would then mean that if there was another player in the market serving the same route, that doing business will even become harder. So does it mean that we'll pay more than we are already paying if that was to be the case?
What I can say as an absolute fact, if I have to divide the number of passengers currently on the domestic routes, for example on Ondangwa, between myself and another carrier, I will have to increase my prices tremendously because I need to recover my costs on each sector. And the same will apply to the other carrier. Any carrier can promise low fares, but the reality is that you have to foot the bills which you end up with at the end of the month. You have to generate the money. Yeah. And there is just no ways in which you can do it with offering lower fares. Our routes are not dense enough to have two competitors flying full planes on the routes. We, as the only player on the route at the moment, can't even fill the planes all the time.
Yeah. You spoke in the early stages of this conversation, Andre, about not being afraid of competition, and that you are already, in any case, having competitors already. If you can reflect on the nature of that competition right now that you have.
Well, for example, we fly to Cape Town, where we compete head-on with Airlink, although they are a shareholder in our business. We're competing 100% against each other on the route. They're a very strong player, they're a very big player, and we had to adjust our schedules to make it possible for us to survive on Cape Town. We were going to fly to Johannesburg. We decided not to fly to Johannesburg because it's simply impossible for us to compete against the likes of South African Airways and now Fly Etosha, who are coming into Joburg. So it's not as if we don't want the competition. The competition in that case is very good for the consumer. And we'll adjust whatever offering we have depending on the competition that we have. But what I can tell you is that if it's not viable for us to fly anymore, we won't fly.
Absolutely. Okay, then we go for a quick break and return to second half with André Compion.
NMH at 1 brings you news from all across Namibia. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, contact nmh1@synergy.com.na. NMH at 1, your lunchtime news companion. Sport Wrap is a daily show focusing on all sport news and current affairs. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, contact sportrap@synergy.com.ma.
Our conversation with Mr. Compion continues. So I had asked a few people on different platforms to to pose questions to you through me. One of them is asking whether you had money, planes, and maintenance capacity when you were setting up FlyNamibia yourselves, to say that if you are objecting this ground for these new guys, what was the situation with yourselves at the time?
Well, we had money, we had planes, and we had maintenance through our partner, which is West Air, and that was proven to the Transportation Commission. When we applied for the FlyNamibia license, we had to prove to the Transportation Commission that we did indeed own or lease aircraft, which we did, that we do have maintenance agreements on all those aircraft, which we provided the agreements, and that we have sufficient funding to start the airline.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I suppose one of the questions also that was raised in the course of the day was whether why is that a prerequisite that I must have those things? What if I don't get approved at the end of the day? What is the point of acquiring planes as a prerequisite for applying to set up an airline? And then I'm told, okay, sorry, Toivo, but we can't allow you to operate. Then what do I do with the planes that I've already acquired?
There is no ways in which the Transportation Commission will deny you a license if you comply with the requirements. The requirements simply are, you have to show that you have a plane or aircraft available that can safely and sustainably serve the routes that you want to fly. That's why you have to indicate to the Transportation Commission which routes you want to fly, what equipment are you going to use, which crews are you going to use, what maintenance is going to be provided.
Yeah.
Those are the elements that the Transportation Commission requires to be able to fairly judge the future safety and sustainability of the applicant.
Yeah. You haven't had an easy takeoff, no pun intended there, but when you started as an airline, because there were a lot of events happening, Air Namibia getting liquidated, you taking off essentially around the same time or soon afterwards, I suppose partly because you could also see now that there's really a need to fill, there's a void to fill in the market. But there was a story that we ran at Namibian Sun early this year about some directors, I think, in their individual capacities, I suppose. They are directors in a holding company that under which FlyNamibia resort, if I understand the correct structure, and those directors acquired Air Namibia planes, and there has been a very difficult, it has been a struggle for many people to understand, to separate these issues properly and understand that maybe it had nothing to do with your company. If you can put things into perspective.
FlyNamibia previously was called Fly West Air.
Yes.
Fly West Air competed with Air Namibia on a number of routes. They were in existence whilst Air Namibia was still in existence. After the demise of Air Namibia, the name was changed to FlyNamibia from Fly West Air. So to say that FlyNamibia started off the operation just because FlyNamibia or Air Namibia was not in existence anymore is simply not true. The airline operated long before that. An important aspect that I have to correct is FlyNamibia is not a subsidiary of Fly West Air or of West Air. It's not part of the company. West Air has a 40% interest in FlyNamibia. We are not a subsidiary of them. The fact that West Air, the core business is aircraft maintenance and aircraft leasing. Put them in the market from a West Air side to put in a bid for the aircraft of Air Namibia. There were a couple of bidders. None of the bids were successful, and at the end of the day, the most successful tenderer of the lot was West Air, and they acquired the aircraft. Not the entity in which the aircraft was acquired was also not West Air. It is an entity that belongs to one of the past shareholders and one of the present shareholders of West Air. Neither one of them are directors of FlyNamibia. So it's the purchase of the ex-Air Namibia aircraft had nothing to do with FlyNamibia. They were purchased by West Air. They're being refurbished by West Air. It's going to take quite some time to get those aircraft flying again. And we may or we may not, from FlyNamibia side, lease some of the aircraft into our operation. But FlyNamibia itself was most certainly not involved in the purchase of the aircraft. As a matter of fact, FlyNamibia only leases aircraft. We don't have owned aircraft at the moment.
Yeah. It's again interesting there, and thanks for your honesty, Andre, on saying that those former Air Namibia planes may end up being leased to you. So can you say with absolute certainty that this series of events that led to those transactions again have nothing to do with anything that happened to Air Namibia, because that has always been their perception. We saw soon after the story came out from Namibian Sun, we saw the Swapo Party Youth League saying, issuing a statement and saying, yeah, this is what we've been saying all along, that there was some conniving behind the closed doors. What can you state on the record?
I can state on record that there was no conniving behind closed doors. There were absolutely no interaction between us and Air Namibia, either from the West Air side or from the FlyNamibia side. Air Namibia's troubles have been coming for many, many years, as you know, and eventually government could not support them anymore and they went into liquidation. That had nothing to do with neither West Air or FlyNamibia. The fact that West Air ended up buying those aircraft was because the liquidators tried their level best to sell the aircraft to whomever was interested in buying them. There were a couple of parties who simply could not come up with the money. The directors of the entity that bought it, who have an interest in West Air, put up a bid, a very fair bid, significantly more than was reported by yourselves in the press at the time, and they were the successful bidder, and they bought the aircraft. But there was absolutely nothing that was not above board as far as the whole transaction is concerned. There was no conniving of any way involved in this.
Yeah, the other part of that raised suspicion at the time was obviously that the directors, or the liquidators rather, of Air Namibia, because there was a bidder who wanted those planes, and they said they were sort of dribbled out of the entire whole thing, and then the liquidators ended up selling the planes to the associates of FlyNamibia in this case. Again, in this case, you know, what is the linkage between FlyNamibia or West Air, the entity now, and guys like Bruni and McLaren, because some association in the past of any sort?
There was absolutely never any association that I'm aware of, and I know all the parties very well. The liquidators have tried their level best to sell the aircraft. And I know that from West Air side, there have been offers made previously to which the liquidators did not even respond because they were busy selling the aircraft to other parties. Those sales never materialized. And the aircraft was standing outside, deteriorating by the day. And the liquidators became very concerned about the fact that at some stage, those aircraft would have become worthless. They had to be sold to preserve the value that was in them. So as far as your question is concerned, was there any previous linkage between the liquidators and the directors of West Air? I can categorically say no.
Okay. Then I suppose the last question then, Andre, is just if you can, because again, like I said earlier, you are facing a lot of perception challenges, and sometimes I sympathize with you because especially knowing that you've been in operation even prior to the demise of Air Namibia, but there's this albatross around your neck that somehow this whole thing was planned, that there was conniving, that there's a cartel of some sort that led to the closure of Air Namibia, so that you really take off properly as an airline. Again, if you can just state on record that whatever the case is.
I've had such a long involvement with aviation in this country, and the problems at Air Namibia is so well known. If anyone would just look at the facts of what happened at Air Namibia with its slow demise from when it started until the airline eventually went bust, it was reported annually that the airline was incurring massive losses. It was general knowledge. Cabinet moaned year after year about the bailouts that they had to give to Air Namibia to keep the airline going. There's no secret in it. And there's also nothing untoward about the fact that these losses were reported on and it became general knowledge. There was no conniving, no one was busy with some crooked scheme. It was just the fact that Air Namibia was mismanaged, they had the wrong business plan, and they went out of business, they went bankrupt. Government just couldn't bail them out any longer.
Yeah, but you could then admit that with the demise came also an opportunity, an opening in the market for you to take off properly.
Undoubtedly so. If you look what happened in South Africa with the demise of Mango that went bust, with the demise of South African Airways that was grounded for so long, with the demise of Comair that went bust, it created a massive opportunity for our partner Airlink. And they stood up, they acquired the additional aircraft, and they took up the challenges, and they're making a fantastic success of it. Obviously, with the void that was left when Air Namibia was shut down, there was an opportunity, and we took it. But I mean, we don't owe the opportunity. The opportunity is there for anyone. Yeah. Anyone who wants to start up a new operation, compete with us, is welcome, as long as they comply with what the Act says. And we would welcome any competition as long as they comply with what we have to comply with. And that is prescribed in the Act 51 of 1949.
Wonderful. Andre, always a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Toyo. Thank you.
Sure. That was tonight's show with André Compion. He is the MD of Fly Namibia. Thank you for watching.